Ka pai, au tēnā rā tātou ke hihiri ake tātou ke tīmata ake. Tīkina atu rā te pūtake o ngā kōrero i te wānanga, tīkina atu rā te hautapu o ngareki, ka whakatea tāne te wānanga ki runga ki e nei tau rā, ki runga ki e nei tau ira. Kia koe te matapunanga, kia mai angi te matapu iho iho, kia turuturu o uta ki turuturu o tai, whano hara mai te toke, haumi e, hui e, tai ki e. Nau mai rā rau mai e ngā tini o te ata, nau mai rā ki te wānanga, kia kaupare atu ko te kōpeke o wero i te nenehi, ai te rangi nei mo ata rau. Top of the morning to everyone this morning. Welcome back to everyone who have experienced Practice Foundations in the past. And for those that are new into the space of Practice Foundation, we welcome you with open arms to our 2026 Practice Foundation series, June. Halfway there. And so just wanted to welcome everyone that's joined us this morning. Our Practice Foundation is an online monthly community of practice for public sector teams doing ambitious and complex mahi, co-hosted by Auckland Co-Design Lab and Healthy Families Far North. You've got myself here, Riri. I'm from the Far North of Ahipara. We've also got our beautiful and lovely team. We have Kelly and Lee that are in the background, our tua wahine that are in the background that are doing all the things that are needed, possible for our Practice Foundation series. If at any time you need to reach out to them, please send them through a message if there's any complications. We've also got Jackie Chan, who have joined us for Practice Foundation's team, and who'll be doing the illustrations for our 2026 series. Jackie will share the start of her illustration at the end of our session, and the full illustration will be shared online in 2 weeks' time. So again, welcome to everyone who's joined our session this morning. And so in our session that we share for practice, for our practical tools and insights of examples of our whānau-centred and mātauranga-led ways of working are making a real difference for whānau and hapori across Aotearoa. We would like to acknowledge that this is a difficult time for many people, and we would like to encourage that support everyone to take care of themselves and each other as much as you all can. So we hope that you find coming together today is restorative. Again, mentioned earlier that Kelly and Leah in the background. If you have any issues or any concerns, feel free to reach out. We also want to let everyone know that we won't be allowing any bots like Read AI to attend these sessions. This is in order to keep this place a safe space for people to connect. And if you're unable to attend, most of our sessions are recorded and can be watched online. Our rhythm today is in the session, we're going to expect Leslynne Jackson from Ngāti Pro, Tautanga Mahake, the project lead at Manukura Tairāwhiti, will share insights from place-based work alongside whānau, providers and iwi of Tairāwhiti. In conversation, we'll also have Penny Hagen, Manukura Tangata Tiriti of Auckland Co-Design Lab, who will also share some kōrero on how whānau insights and locally held data and evidence is being used to surface systems barriers, support more responsive policy, and enable simpler, more effective ways of working. This kōrero will also explore what the team has learned about growing the conditions of community-led commissioning. So, our session today, within the 19 minutes, is that we'll have our whakawhanaunga within small breakout groups. Then we'll hear a conversation between Leslynne and Penny, and then we'll have some more breakout group time for us all to wānanga, and then we come back again as a whole group to then speak out freely in a wānanga context. So, for our wānanga, for our first part of our session, for whakawhanaunga, we're going to go into breakout groups for the next 10 minutes. However, what we're going to do is we're going to introduce yourselves, so your name, organisation, and the pātai that we really want you to deep dive into is, what is this role of whānau voice within your organisation and mahi currently? Again, what is the role of whānau voice within your organisation and or mahi currently? Kelly's going to drop that pātai in the chat for you all to have a good kōrero about it. Ka tukuna kia koutou. Oh, kia ora tātou. Yeah, it looks like there was some good kōrero that happened in all the breakout groups. However, we're going to bring it back to our kōrero for today, especially our very special guest, he manga tapu, Leslynne Jackson, no Ngāti Pro, no Taitanga Mahaki, a project lead at Manukura Tairāwhiti. Leslynne was born and raised in Tairāwhiti in Gisborne. She has more than 30 years experience working in and around social services and associated networks. Leslynne is a strong advocate for both systemic changes and community-led action that improves the lives of children, whānau, and vulnerable adults. Alongside Leslynne, we have Penny Hagen, who is a Manukura Tangata Tiriti at Auckland Co-Design Lab. Penny has worked across Australia and Aotearoa supporting cross-sector teams and communities to respond to complex social issues. Penny's focus is how policy, evidence, and investment is connected to lived realities and aspirations of community. Nō reira, kia kaurua tahi, ka tukuna te rākau kōrero, kia kaurua ki a koe e Penny. Penny.
Kia ora rere, nā mihi, e te karakia me tō mihi e tēnei ata. It's an absolute pleasure to be the person that gets to ask Leslynne some questions this morning. So it'll be Leslynne that you're hearing from, and I just get to try and prompt and coax some of the deep insight that she and her team have built up over the last, I think, 11 years, I think. It is a real pleasure to have Leslynne join us on Practice Foundations. We've been wanting to have this conversation for a couple of years, so really excited about the opportunity to unpack some things and learn some more about what's happening in Manukura Tairāwhiti. And so I just would like to again acknowledge and thank you, Leslynne, for joining us this morning, and then just start off by inviting you to share a little bit with us about Manukura Tairāwhiti. And some of you on the line will be really familiar with this work and possibly with this area, and lots of people have whakapapa connections there, but some of you may not be so familiar with the amazing mihi that they've been doing and what it means to be set up as a place-based initiative. And so I'm just going to start by inviting Leslynne to talk to us about the mihi, and introduce it a little bit, the context of it. It has been, I think, 11 years, you can correct me, so there's a lot of learning that's gone on in that time. So tell us a little bit about what a place-based initiative is, what it means to be place-based, and in particular, Manukura Tairāwhiti, the mihi that you've done there, and just some of the things that you have learned in that time. So I hand over to Leslynne to share a little bit of that first kōrero with us. Kia ora.
Kia ora, Penny. Morena, everyone. Thank you for joining the call. I'm excited to be talking to you all this morning. A little bit nervous too, by the way, but you know, we'll cope with that. We started Manukura Tairāwhiti in 2016, and it was a time when we had a lot of different focus groups working on different separate issues, social issues like family violence or vulnerable children. We had disability groups and prisoner reintegration groups. It was really about consolidating all of the effort and energy that looked across the system from end to end. And so the big difference really between a provider and a place-based initiative is a provider's delivering social services, social work or community work directly with whānau, and a place-based initiative is working with those providers, but also working with government agencies and working to gather evidence and insights about what's working, what's not working. And we have a purpose that's very similar to some providers, but it's a broader approach. So the purpose of Manukura Tairāwhiti is enabling all whānau in Tairāwhiti to flourish. And how we do that is about understanding the context of the social sector and working in a place does mean that you're focusing on all of the conditions within that place. Like everyone, we experienced COVID. Like many other places, we've experienced severe weather events, really serious. You know, in 2023, we had twice the annual rainfall in 1 year. These things have had huge impacts on roads, on the economy. You know, our health sector, like everywhere, is very, very stretched, and rural health systems are very stretched. And all of those things combine to have an impact on the social sector. And what happens for whānau when they're looking for support in the social sector? Some of the work from the other sectors flows over into the work of the social sector. And we find, by understanding where those pressure points are, where those needs are coming up for whānau that can't be met by the kind of mainstream systems, that the social sector kind of flexes and tries to be filling some of those gaps. So yeah, it's about understanding the purpose of a place-based initiative, understanding the context of the place, taking a whole of system view, and providing more of a stewardship role, encouraging collaboration that leads to action, leads to learning, and ideally leads to change.
Kia ora, that's awesome, thank you. Some people might be aware there was 3 place-based initiatives running in Aotearoa, where there is still one in South Auckland, and then Tairāwhiti is the 3rd one that is still continues and is quite unique in terms of holding that backbone function. So I think we're going to hear a little bit more about what that means in terms of even for us to understand that there's a role to play connecting the ecosystem, and that isn't about delivering services, but it is about bringing together the relationships between what's in place and using data in a really different way. So excited for you to tease that out a little bit more for us, because it's been such a critical aspect of being able to work differently in place, right, is creating and being that platform. So we were going to talk a little bit about, and people feel free to drop pātai in the chat or hold on to them, and we will come back to anything that you want to follow up on. But one of the things that's been really powerful about the work that you've done and your team has done is around the use of data and what that actually means and what that lets you do in terms of working with whānau, in terms of working with the system. And often when we think about data from a government perspective, we think about data about people. And I think the take that you have on it is really quite different in terms of how data can help us interrogate system performance, tell us what's happening, what the barriers are, and how we could be working much more effectively. So, and you've also developed some really rigorous ways of working with data and locality. So could you talk to us a little bit about the role of data in your work and what you've seen when you've been able to kind of interrogate what's actually happening from a systems perspective?
Yeah, of course. And actually, I'll just share my screen.
Awesome.
There we go. Can we all see that okay?
Yeah, that's great. Thank you.
Yeah. So the original brief that the Manaaki Tairāwhiti Governance Group pulled together for our work as a backbone organisation, and the difference between, you mentioned that originally there were 3 place-based initiatives, one in Northland, one in counties Manukau and us in Tairāwhiti. And to be honest, we ran to catch the bus. We were the last ones involved because Manaaki Tairāwhiti was brought together voluntarily by the chief executives of the Rūnanga, Te Rūnanga o Turanganui Kiwa and Ngāti Porou in 2016. They could see that things weren't working as well as we all want them to, and they wanted to get a clearer line of sight of how things were going. And they wanted us to do these things, put whānau at the centre of everything we do, create that opportunity for us to see across the sector the things that are happening, the things that are working well, and the barriers or challenges that are sort of defeating whānau from getting the support that they need. And they had aspiration then in 2017 to become a commissioning agency for the region. More about that later. And we heard about this term, NFAs, no further action, where whānau had reached a point where the support was no longer available to them. And our chair, Ronald Nepe, was adamant that that should never happen. People should never be cut off from support if they're asking for it. We should find ways to do better. And so we came up with a plan of how we would do that. We would do a project called a Navigator project, and we would develop the workforce working alongside frontline practitioners to develop their capability to deliver social services and support to whānau, but also to gather evidence and insights of whānau's journey through systems from end to end. And to do that, we were informed by a systems improvement methodology. And big shout out to Steve Schaefer, Sarah, Stu, Kim, and the other business coaches from MSD that spent a lot of time and gave a lot of loving care to us, teaching us how to apply the methodology of systems improvement. And that really changed the way we thought about our work. We really thought about putting whānau at the centre, and how the information we could gather from them would give us true insights on the performance of the system, and we could uncover some of the system conditions, the actual way the work works, that stop people from getting the types of support that they need. And of course, having a strong focus on community development and working across all groups of providers, that was really important to us too. The Navigator project was as one of the many pieces of work that Manaaki Tairāwhiti has been involved in. And the purpose of that project was to capture whānau voice to inform system change. So we all work within systems. Largely those systems are invisible to us. It's just the way we're trained to work. You follow the steps that you're trained to do in your daily work. And we don't really often take the time to reflect on each of those steps, what its purpose is, and whether it achieves its purpose the way it's been designed. Are call centres more effective than front counters with receptionists? Those kinds of, often we've got technology-enabled steps in our systems. Do they help or do they hinder, and how would we know? So we described the Navigator project as the water you pour through the system to see where the holes are. That's what this picture is about. And so in the end, we had 14 navigators working in 10 different iwi and NGO organisations. So it was really important. We had some working in disability sector, some working with rangatahi, some working in iwi social services, and we had them sort of pepper potted around the places that people do go for support. And then each of them worked individually with whānau, but came together collectively to share what they were learning. And we built a tech platform that they could enter whānau voice data in, no identifying information about individual whānau, and only by consent. And whānau gave consent for us to have their data for the purpose of learning and ideally informing change in the system. And a lot of whānau were happy to give consent, whether whether their experiences were positive or negative. Often they want the system to improve. If they've, hit a barrier, or they've sensed some frustration, maybe not understood the relevance of why they were being asked to produce certain evidence. They want the system to be better, not just for them, but for whānau that will use the parts of the system that they're interacting with. So what we found when we captured the data over a number of years was that whānau interact with very complex systems. And this is a diagram that the business coaches supported one of our teams to produce. And it's the Tairāwhiti housing system. You might remember in about 2015, the Productivity Commission produced a very comprehensive report on improving the effectiveness of the social sector. And they created a quadrant diagram that plotted whānau on a quadrant diagram based on whether their needs were simple or complex and whether they had capacity to navigate systems or not navigate systems. And they rightly came to the conclusion that there is a group of whānau whose needs are complex, who lack the capacity to navigate systems, and they need navigators to support them to work their way through these systems. So that's why we had navigators to help us gather this data, because we knew that their role would be supporting whānau to navigate these complex pictures. But what we learned is that various systems that people interact with are either complex or simple, that the workforce working within these systems either has power to make decisions or they don't have power to make decisions. And in a system as complex as this housing system, you can see that there are a number, obviously we're not going to look really closely at it right now, but there are a number of places where decisions are made, and it's not one person that makes a decision about whether a whānau gets access to a home or not. It's multiple people in multiple sites with multiple different system conditions in play. What we found, that this housing system picture, it's pretty heinous, isn't it? But we found similar pictures in health, in justice, and in other parts of the welfare and social sector. Every sector that whānau were interacting with were some not quite as complex as this, but I mean as this one, but many of them were. And so over a period from 2019 to 2025, the navigators worked with 1,500 whānau. Whānau had shared with us about 8,300 needs, and as navigators walked with them through systems or delivered the service themselves, they encountered 6,800 barriers. So each whānau had about 5 needs. Not hard to imagine, need help getting, a kid into school, or getting help finding a job, or getting help moving into a right-sized home, immediate supports, needing, kai, basic things that whānau need to get by, but also the more complex things, support with specialist appointments in health, disability supports, etc. So overall, there was a barrier rate of over 50% in all of the main systems. So whether it was a health need you were supporting someone with, a housing need, a welfare need, a justice need, in every agency that whānau were interacting with, the barrier rate was over 50%. So it's not a single government agency that's complex like this, it's all of them. And combine all of that, the impact is significant on whānau. And what we found from the work that the navigators did was that whānau have direct needs, which is things like kai or bedding or access to an appointment. And we categorise those as direct needs. But whānau also had system support needs. Can you help me get a form? Can you help me submit a form? Can you help show me where to go online? Can you come with me because I don't understand what they're saying? And what was really surprising for us was to find that the direct support needs and the system support needs were about 50-50. So half of the work that navigators were doing was directly related to satisfying the conditions of the system rather than supporting an immediate need of a whānau. So most of those system condition or system support needs get you to a place where you'll get the support that you need, but you need help to get the help, if that makes sense. So yeah, that complexity, it flows all the way through the work. And some of the other work that we were doing was about testing assumptions. And I'll just stop sharing for a second. Testing the assumptions that sit behind the way that our support systems work. For example, we understood there to be a bit of a myth out there about how much support whānau get. And this idea, this thinking that if you give people too much support, they'll become dependent. And we don't want to encourage dependence on support. We want people to be independent and live the lives that they choose to value. But we tested that in the Navigator project, and what the data and evidence showed us is that actually once people have their immediate needs met, they don't come back and keep using services unless their circumstances change or unless there's a new issue that arises that they need support with. So in challenging those kinds of assumptions that are made about who needs support, how much support they need, and how long support should be provided for, we're in favour of a more flexible and open-ended range of support, because we don't think that people will, be greedy and gobble up more services than they really need. So I think using whānau voice to uncover and help us think about flexibility and learning loops. And so we're in favour of much more flexible support services. We know a lot of support services are time limited by contracts. A lot of services in the community, you only have, 6 sessions or 8 sessions, or, the program only runs for 10 weeks or whatever. And we would like to encourage and see more flexibility, not just in the way programs and services are delivered, but also the eligibility of people, so that people can preventatively and access support early. So I think that does hopefully help understand the difference between providers and a place-based initiative that's informing, taking whānau voice and informing the system about where barriers in the parts of their system are, to inspire and encourage providers, whether they're in community organisations or in government agencies, to think about the way their system works and the, whether the people who are working in the system have sufficient power to make decisions, or whether they have enough of the right training, and whether they understand their own work from end to end, and whether they could be given more opportunity to maybe step back from the daily work and look at how the whole system works and see ways that they could test perhaps hearing feedback and whānau voice, and test ways of achieving the result that everybody's looking for, but doing it in a different way, in a way that is focused on continuous improvement.
Yeah, awesome. I'm going to ask you a little bit more about that. Thanks for that, Leslynne, just sharing some of there's so much to pack in, right? 11 years of work to pack into 15 minutes. Really, really interesting, though, that one of the key things you've been able to do as that backbone function with quite sophisticated data collection capacity is firstly evidence the power of flexibility. So it's not just a kind of an idea or something that we see or hear from working alongside whānau. You can provide evidence for how much more effective the flexibility is. And also the difference between, so when we might walk alongside whānau's the journey of whānau and kind of unpack all the things that, you know, the system requires you to do and say, this feels really complex, and we get that qualitative perspective of it, is that your platform is able to show us from a quantitative perspective how much effort the system is going, you know, like how much extra effort is being required through the system, and where the failure in the system performance actually is from a quantitative perspective. So it's like we can match up those worlds of the complexity that we know is the lived reality of people trying to engage with different services. Someone's just talking about whānau and Waikato is so overwhelmed with all the different services, you don't know who it is. You know, you're just like, it's that lady in the blue car. Like that level of needing to kind of keep track of all the things, you can demonstrate that in a quantitative way in terms of systems performance. So the power of that kind of matching of different data types just seems really significant. I know we've only got a minute or two left, but I'm just wanting to pick up on that last point that you made and connect it up with this idea of the localization of commissioning and being able to have more control and decision making locally. So you talked about how some of the people in that the housing picture can make decisions and some can't, and the proposition of localizing investment and commissioning and decision making. And if you were to be moving more into the space where that community commissioning or localization of commissioning was happening based on what you've already learned, what sorts of things would you be seeing if it's guided by what whānau are telling us matters, and how are you sort of preparing yourself and the team for that local capability of, you know, it's local governance, it's local decision making? What do some of the key things look like from your perspective to ready for that or move towards that?
Penny. I've just got one more slide to share, I think. So from that whānau voice that we collected, I remember I said in 2017 that Manaaki Tairāwhiti leaders had an aspiration to be commissioning agencies for the region back then. And so the work that we've done in creating an evidence and insights, creating a practice framework, working with providers to test different levels of flexibility and understand where investment could go, those are kind of the foundations that we believed we'd need to have in place in order to be successful in commissioning. And, you know, where we found the level of need was really significant. You know, 50% of families have unmet health needs. Over 50% have unmet housing needs. We can see where new investment could go, but we've also learned about how difficult those complex systems are for people to navigate and how that generates so much waste work. And obviously, if we were commissioning, we'd want to be commissioning services that were simple and easy to understand, they were easy to access, they were easy to use. Workarounds, having navigators is a workaround for complex systems. Navigators and flexible workforces are fantastic and they do great work. But really, if systems were simpler, half of the work that they were doing would have disappeared. So we would want to commission services locally that could be administered locally and delivered in a and what whānau told us, these are the priorities for them: housing, health, disability, and employment. And what we also found is that if you want to have an impact on relieving material hardship, the things that whānau most frequently ask for, kai, groceries, clothing, furnishings like bedding and household essentials, and transport. And it's not just now that we've got a fuel crisis, well, you know, the price of fuel is so high. This has been long-standing, and we can say that over 8 years, transport has always been a theme for whānau in Tairāwhiti. And these are the areas where I would hope that future commissioners, based on the reality of the lives lived by whānau in Tairāwhiti, could make localised decisions to invest more in the services that whānau say they need, and take direct action to relieve the hardship that whānau are facing. And that's about working collectively with government agencies and with providers. We will always have, more than one system in play. And it's about learning how to understand how to get the best from those systems, how to identify where the best places are to do our work to improve the quality of services that whānau get and the accessibility of those services, and how to deploy all of the resources, money, people, policy, and how we better interact with central government and be able to demonstrate how progress is made and how we measure progress from the perspective of whānau.
That's awesome, thank you. If we've got time, when we come back from a breakout, I'm going to follow up on some of the sort of governance questions, but I can also see people are dropping some pātai in the chat as well that we can pick up on too. So we'll give you a little break for a minute, and thank you very much for sharing what you have today. It's amazing. We could go in so many different directions and keep diving deeper. For now, we'll just give everyone the opportunity to do some processing of what they heard, connect with each other. And so we'll have a short breakout. We're just inviting you to reflect in your group around things that stood out for you from what Leslynne's shared with us. And also a sort of provocation, a prompting question around, and someone's going to paste it in the chat for me, in terms of what might be holding us back from, I'm looking for it before I say it out loud. What might be holding us back from more devolving of commissioning and services locally? What's the thing? It's happened a lot more internationally, a lot faster than it has here in Aotearoa, and we're definitely trying to move in that direction. But what might be some of the things that are getting in the way of greater devolution in Aotearoa in terms of the things that Leslynne's talking about? So we'll leave you for a few minutes, e te whānau, to have a kōrero in your breakout group, and then we'll come back and have a little bit more time with Leslynne, follow up on a couple of those pātai. So thanks again, everybody. Thank you, Leslynne. Kia ora. Hope you had a good chat, e te whānau, in your groups. I just wanted to follow up on a thread. I raised the question of governance at the end there, of local governance, but I want to open that up a little bit more, because one of the things that Leslynne's been speaking to is this learning function that was enabled through the navigators. And we were just clarifying in the breakout group that the navigator roles, the funding for that finished last year, but the opportunity to take that forward in the future is what Leslynne's looking at. And one of the things that in a sort of prep conversation we had a couple of weeks ago, Leslynne said to me about the collecting of data being done for a different purpose. So, we might think about collecting data around performance or reporting or what's happening to these different individuals in the system, but what's happening in Manukura Tairāwhiti is this collection of data for learning and understanding what the issues are and then being able to respond to them. And the navigator role was playing a learning function. So there was two sides to what was happening there. And that learning function is partly what enables you to connect up the ecosystem and operate quite differently. So I'm wondering if you could just talk a little bit more, Leslynne, about that learning role and what you would see being important around having that live feedback loop between whānau experience and how the system operates in quite a different way to how we would think about it now.
Yeah, thanks, Penny. What we did with the navigators was a prototype of a learning system that we'd want to have in place if we were successful becoming commissioners. And what you can do within a contract for services is you can include the building in of the learning loops, the capture of data for the purpose of learning, the ability to share information, not private individual data, but the themes and sub-themes of where it is in the parts of the system that are causing friction for whānau, that are stopping them from progressing and living the lives that they value. And so there are lots of system conditions that are built into national systems that locally you can't unplug from. The leaders don't have the authority to say, we're just going to stop using the assessment for social housing, or we'll just stop using the criteria for, report of concern to oranga tamariki. Those things are hardwired in, and if you're trying to improve the performance of the system from the outside, you have to have some different levers, and we've learned that sadly you can't change the system from the outside. You can share the information. You can hope that you're inspiring leaders to look at that data and say, I'm curious, I'd like to learn more about how we could do better in this area. And, ideally they'd get some systems coaching, and they'd approach that with in a methodical, evidence-informed way. But where there's an opportunity to do that differently, because systems have been designed and are being delivered locally, within the contracts, you have the ability to be more flexible or require some changes to be made, because you have the ability to, do more than try and inspire and raise curiosity. You've got the ability to say, it looks like this system has got creating more barriers for whānau than it is providing positive goods. So let's work together to make something happen there. And the role of the navigators being cross-sector was really important too, because most of us are quite constrained. I work in health, I can only help you with your health issues. I can't go to the school, or I can't go with you to your doctor's appointment to help you understand the language that they're using. So increasing the scope of people's ability to go further and then capture information about how those things fit together or don't.
Thank you. Riri, do you want to jump in and pick up on some of the pātai in the chat?
Yeah, I've got some good kōrero. I've got one from Marie Brown. When navigators hear and find collect insights, how is it then wrapped up to nudge the system? Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yes, well, we did lots of painstaking manual work, theming and sub-theming the data and looking at where the similarities and differences were. We have a data analyst on our team, and we've written a number of reports that we've presented to our governance group to share with them where the opportunities are to look at doing things differently.
Sounds good. We've also got from Angie Tangaire, just acknowledging how well you guys are doing, but wondering what you're observing as the system conditions and the levers with most potential for systems change to embed the learning.
Again, I think it's about curiosity. It's about inspiring our leaders to say, look, we all know this isn't achieving as much as it has the potential to achieve. So what could we do to, confirm these barriers or investigate them for ourselves? And then how would we think about doing things differently? And have a play, have a practice, have an experiment. Experiment's not the right word because we're talking about people's lives, but let's have a go, because as long as we're trying to do better, I'm sure that we'll find new ways of keeping things simple, keeping things easier for whānau to connect with, and working collaboratively across agencies is a great way to find areas to focus on too.
That's awesome. We've also got just some pātai here, whether you can answer them or not. We've got one here just from Pip that's just dropped one. What is the role of activism in shifting systems, particularly for those of working in system?
That is a fabulous question. I often think that it's a little bit sad when someone has to tell their private story of pain and difficulty in order to attract attention to an issue and advocate for change. And I wish that people didn't have to do that. But I wholeheartedly support activism for us as a society to share examples of things that we know where change is needed. But the approach that we took of capturing whānau voice anonymously, protecting privacy, looking at what whānau needed and whether there were barriers to getting them what they needed, how long it took to get the things that they needed, whether barriers could be worked around or resolved. All of that protects privacy of whānau who don't have to be such strong advocates for themselves. Change should happen because systems want to be ever evolving, learning and changing and doing better for whānau.
That's awesome. Have you got any anything else that you'd like to share, Leslynne, and that we haven't touched base on, and that you think will be valuable for our listeners?
I just want to say, I just want to take a moment to thank everyone who's on the call, because I know we all work hard. I know everyone comes to work and there's so much uncertainty for a lot of people that they're facing at the moment. But I know that everybody is valued and the work they do is important. I think that the work of public servants is incredible, and it's often they're often unsung heroes. I want you to please take away that when we look at those pictures of system complexity, we know that that's complex for you as well. And we know that simplifying systems would be beneficial to public servants as well as beneficial to whānau, because all of us would get more of the rewarding part of our role of seeing people do well and do better. If we could eliminate some of those, some of those system conditions that have found their way into the world of helping people.
Nice. Just another part. So, did you develop your own practice framework, or did you work with something that was already pre-made or framed up by some others?
Yeah, we definitely developed our own, because if you expect people to use a local framework, they have to be involved in the design of that. And they have to understand, right, this is what whānau need from us, this is what really matters to whānau. These are the steps that we can take to deliver the greatest value to whānau without imposing our own system conditions or our own needs on them. And so there was an opportunity for the community to be involved in the delivery of a practice model, as well as there was an opportunity for community to be involved in the design of the measurement framework. But we did draw on Te Ao Māori and some, the best practice frameworks that we'd found in other places, like the beautiful work at the Auckland Co-Design Lab.
Lovely. Any other pātai from anyone else before we close up our session? Penny?
I've got one last pātai, if that's okay. Leslynne, you were talking before about running to catch the bus to jump onto the PBI list, and that the starting point for your mahi came from iwi leaders, came from place. So it grew out of place, saying, people in place saying, what's happening isn't working for us and we want to do it differently, and being able to hook into a system opportunity at that time, and that the other two PBIs started very differently. So they started perhaps, I might be paraphrasing correctly, but with sort of top-down KPIs versus Manukura Tangata starting in place. And I'm just curious about what difference you think that made for you to be able to that was the starting point for this mahi.
Yeah, I was really nervous at the start of this, because I felt quite envious in a way that they had a theory of change and they had KPIs and they had programs designed to be delivered. And I felt like we were behind the start line because we kind of had nothing except an inkling that things were too complex and whānau weren't getting the help they needed. And so what we did was we said we would work with whānau, and through them we would surface the barriers which would lead the program of work that we would deliver on. Because rather than having a preset target to work with and preset lead and lag measures from government agencies about where the dial needed to be moved and which dial we were going to move. We knew that we had to start with whānau voice, hear what, from a whānau's perspective, what their real needs and challenges are, understand those first before we tried to put any kind of intervention in place, and build a measurement framework based on what mattered to whānau, and follow that through so that we could see the impact of any of the work that we had, and we could measure, the performance of navigators in terms of how many responses they were able to deliver to what types of need for whānau, and tailor workforce development to support them to do more of what whānau really needed. And so that was all a brilliant opportunity to sort of start from a place of learning rather than setting goals and then jumping in to try and achieve those goals. So we were very fortunate to have that opportunity, and I'd encourage people, be brave, take those organic routes of learning and discover the reality of the problem from the lived experience of whānau before you decide on your, I'm going to use a Steve Schaefer description here, use your, it's not a theory of change. What is it, Steve?
It's a hypothesis of change.
Yes.
It's not a theory, it's a hypothesis. It's what you think is going to happen, whether it does or not, you are not in control of.
That's right. Thanks.
Rawe, awesome. Thank you so much. It's a beautiful place to leave it. I'll hand back to you. Riri, ngā mihi nui ki a koe, Leslynne.
Tēnā koutou. Tēnā kaurua. Ngā mihi nui ki a koe, Leslynne. We thank you. We can't thank you enough for sharing your learnings and experience with such openness and generosity. So the insights that you've gifted us, will continue to guide and inspire everyone, all our listeners today. It's such rich kōrero. So thank you very much for our dream session. Also, Penny, I just want to thank you and acknowledge you for your skillful drawing out the kōrero that's shared by Leslynne through your thoughtful facilitation and questioning. So, e mihi ana kia kaurua, ka mutumihina kia tātou katoa, ko kororau mai, mo tēnei wānanga o tātou, ko te manako ia ka putātu koutou, ka mahi a te mahi, mo te ake, no reira ka mihi ka tika kia tātou katoa. So just again, thank you everyone for partaking and joining us this morning in our session. I can't thank you all enough. But don't forget, we've got another session next month, every month after today. So please do continue to join in. As mentioned, we'll just call upon Jackie, who's started the illustration. So I'll share, Jackie, you still there? I'll get you to share your starting of your illustration of today's kōrero.
Doing the little quick juggle.
Okay. So just in the meantime, so with today's recording, so 2 weeks from now, the illustration should be completed by Jackie, and that'll be shared for everyone.
Just finding back to the right.
To have a good leisurely glaze.
Okay. Still lots of space.
Yes, heaps of space. So again, that'll be completed in another 2 weeks' time for everyone to pull from on the website. But hopefully this is all very helpful for everyone. But please do share back any feedback on today's session, what you like, what you didn't like, and what was helpful, what wasn't helpful. Please put that in the chat, and then we'll draw from that at a later date. And then we've also just wanted to mention to everyone again for jumping in online. We've also got a process of developing a tikanga for Practice Foundation. We'd really appreciate your feedback on what we're developing. So Kelly will share a link for everyone to tap into to have a look at it and then share some feedback with that. Wanted to let you know that the lab is hosting a 2-day training on Niho Taniwha in July. This is designed as an introduction for people new to Niho Taniwha, and Kelly will also share that link if you'd like to register if you have any interest on that kaupapa. So places are limited at homa, so please get in quick and have a little jam. So next month's session, so is an exciting one. We have Eriwini Hawk from the lab leading a special session for Matariki. So please note that the session will not be recorded. So please jump on, get in quick, be on time, and enjoy our session with Eriwini next week. Ka pai a homa, here's hoping that everyone will go back home and have a fantastic rest of the week. Hei whakakapi ake I te tātou wahanga I tēnei tāmaka tuku atu, ki te wāhingaro he karakia whakakapi ake. Te whakairi hia te kapu, kia wā te ai te ara, kia turu ki whakatahai, kia turu ki whakatahai. Whānau, haramai te toki, haumi, huie, tai ki.